My name is Elise Mercer, and I was 28 years old the morning my mother walked into a will reading she had not been invited to, and smiled like she still had the right to call me her daughter. She wore black, of course, not grieving black, strategic black, the kind of dress a woman chooses when she wants witnesses to mistake entitlement for heartbreak. My father stood beside her with his jaw clenched and his phone in his hand, waiting for a lawyer who thought he was coming to a quiet family meeting. My older sister slipped in behind them, already angling her phone low against her purse like she was deciding which part of my life would look best online. They had not spoken to me in 15 years. Not once. Not when I graduated high school. Not when I finished college. Not when I became CFO of Mercer Property Group. Not when the uncle who raised me died in January of 2025 and left behind 12 commercial buildings, a $23.7 million estate, and a will that named me as sole heir. But on March 14th, when money finally made my name useful again, my mother came through that conference room door and said, "Elise, sweetheart, we need to handle this as a family." That was the moment I understood what my uncle Julian had built before he died. Not just a company, not just an estate plan, a room, 47 chairs, a court reporter, auditors, charitable beneficiaries, tenants who had known him for decades, his attorney at the head of the table, a sealed folder beside my right hand, a brass fountain pen in my jacket pocket. My mother thought she was walking into an inheritance. She had no idea she was walking into a record. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge, where quiet people keep receipts and sometimes the most powerful sentence in a room is read from a legal document. If this kind of slow, precise justice is your thing, drop a comment with where you are listening from and subscribe so you do not miss the next story. This one begins with a 13-year-old girl and a duffel bag, but it ends with a mother crying in a room where nobody reaches for tissues. To understand the will reading, you have to understand August of 2010. Portland, Oregon. I was 13. I had won a 6-week summer scholarship at Portland State for a math and writing program. I applied without telling anyone because in our house, asking for help was just another way to be told no. I wrote the essay on a public library computer after school, printed the application with quarters I saved from lunch money, and checked the mailbox every day like my future might arrive folded in an envelope. When the acceptance letter came, I taped it to the refrigerator. For 2 days, I let myself believe the letter meant something simple. I had earned a place. Then my mother called a family dinner. Celeste Mercer was beautiful in the way people call women beautiful when they mean controlled. Hair perfect, silk scarf folded beside her plate, warm brown skin powdered smooth under the dining room light. Voice soft, eyes trained to water exactly when watering would help. My father, Nolan, sat at the end of the table in his work shirt, hands wrapped around a glass of iced tea. My sister Brielle, 16 then, sat across from me scrolling through her phone with the bored confidence of a girl who already knew the room would bend her way. My mother put the scholarship letter in the center of the table. "Brielle needs this more," she said. I laughed because I thought she was joking. No one laughed with me. "She is applying to colleges next year," my mother continued. "A program like this would strengthen her applications. It has my name on it." "You are already smart, honey." That was how my mother did it. She wrapped theft in compliment paper and expected me to thank her for the bow. "Brielle needs help standing out." Brielle did not look up. "I applied," I said. "I wrote the essay." "And that was generous of you." "I did not do it for her." My father's glass hit the table hard enough to jump the ice. "Watch your tone." I remember the sound more clearly than his face, the crack of glass against wood, the way my stomach folded in on itself, the sudden awareness that a thing could be taken from me not because I failed, but because I had succeeded in a house where success was supposed to belong to someone else. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled it away. Her eyes filled, not with sadness, with strategy. "If you cannot put family first," she said, "you do not belong in this house." I looked at my father. He did not defend me. He did not defend the truth. He looked at the scholarship letter as if paper had caused this problem by existing. So I stood up. I went to my room. I packed a duffel bag with 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, my library card, a notebook, and the scholarship letter I peeled off the refrigerator with shaking hands. But 2 years earlier, I had emailed him a question about a book because he was the only adult I knew who read things with indexes, and he had answered with a list of 10 more books and a note that said, "If you read all of these, write back with the one that annoyed you most." I did. He kept writing back. He was the only adult in my family who ever asked what I thought and waited long enough to hear the answer. "Elise," he said on the phone, "pack what you have." "I already did." "Good." That afternoon, he drove down from Seattle in a black sedan that smelled like old leather and coffee. He parked in front of Hannah's house and did not honk. He just waited. I walked out carrying everything I owned. He looked at the duffel. Then he looked at me. "That all?" "That's all." He opened the passenger door. "We're going to Seattle. You can come back if you want, but tonight you need a bed and a locked door." He did not insult my parents on the drive. He did not tell me I was brave. He did not ask me to cry so he could comfort me. For 3 hours up I-5, he gave me the kindest thing anyone could have given me then. He gave me silence without punishment in it. Seattle looked too big that night. I remember the rain on the windshield and the way the city lights smeared gold across the glass. Julian lived in a condominium near Capitol Hill then, 3 floors above a smaller unit he owned and used for storage. He put me in his guest room, handed me a clean towel, and pointed to the kitchen. "Food is in there. If you use the last of something, write it on the pad." "Okay. School starts in 3 weeks. We'll discuss options tomorrow." "Okay." He paused in the doorway. "I am not your father," he said. I did not know how to answer that. "Good," I said finally. One corner of his mouth moved. That was our first family moment. Julian enrolled me in Lakeside that fall. Private, demanding, full of students who carried expensive backpacks and opinions they had been encouraged to develop. I was terrified for about a month. Then I realized something that changed my life. Prepared beats charming. I could not outspend them. I could not out-network them. I could not talk about ski trips or summer houses, but I could read every assignment twice. I could show my work. I could ask better questions. Julian understood that before I did. "The room does not have to like you," he told me after I came home furious about a group project. "It has to respect the work." That became one of the sentences I built myself around. On my 14th birthday, he gave me a brass fountain pen. It was heavy, warm-toned, engraved with JM on the clip. He said it had been his since 1986. He placed it in my palm without ceremony. "Use it for things that matter." "Like what?" "You'll know." That was Julian. No extra sugar, no performance. But I kept that pen in my jacket pocket from that day on, through high school, through University of Washington, through late nights in the business school library with coffee gone cold beside me, through my CPA exam, through my first job inside Mercer Property Group, where half the staff assumed Julian had hired me because I was family, and the other half watched to see whether I would fail quietly enough not to embarrass him. I did not fail. I started as an intern during college, then financial analyst at 23, senior analyst, director of finance at 26. I learned the company from the ground up, not the glossy version on investor packets, the real version: roof leaks, lease options, property taxes, tenant improvements, insurance schedules, elevator maintenance contracts. Julian made me read everything. "A lease tells you who has power," he used to say. "Read until you can see where they hid it." He was not easy on me. I loved him for that. He did not soften expectations because I had been abandoned. He did not turn my childhood into a museum exhibit. He gave me work. He gave me rules. He gave me a chair at tables I had earned by being prepared. 3 months before he died, Julian called me into his office. His office had a view of Mount Rainier on clear days and a walnut desk that had survived 3 recessions and at least one angry tenant throwing a stapler. He was thinner by then. The arrhythmia had aged him quickly. His hand trembled when he reached for a folder, and he pretended it did not. I pretended with him because dignity sometimes means not narrating what another person already knows. He slid a document across the desk. CFO appointment, he said. I stared at the page. Effective when? Already effective if you sign. Julian, do not make me sentimental. It irritates me. I smiled because he wanted me to. He uncapped the brass pen, my pen, the one he had given me years earlier, and signed his portion with careful pressure. Then he handed it to me. You've earned it, he said. Do not make me regret it. That was his version of a ceremony. I signed. Afterward, he held the pen for a second before giving it back. Vivian has a folder. Vivian Hart was his attorney at Morrison & Sullivan, a woman with silver hair, sharp glasses, and the calm of someone who had watched wealthy people behave badly for 30 years. What folder? For after. After what? He looked at me. I hated that I understood. Do not open anything without Vivian, he said. Do not sign anything without Vivian. And Elise? Yes. Do not let Nolan near the estate. My father. He had not said my father's name in months. Why would he be near it? Julian leaned back, tired suddenly in a way he did not bother hiding. Because men who give things away often return when they learn someone else made them valuable. I did not ask more. Julian had taught me patience. You do not claw at a locked drawer when the person who built the desk tells you where the key will be. The first health scare had come in 2023, cardiac arrhythmia. He collapsed in his office on a Tuesday and came back Thursday, pretending death had been an inefficient meeting. By late 2024, the scares were closer together. November hospital stay, December hospital stay, new medication, slower walk, more files moved from his office to mine. In his last week, I slept on the couch in his condo upstairs, checking on him every 4 hours like the cardiologist instructed. January 9th, 2025, 6:14 in the morning. I found his bedroom door open, the reading lamp still on, and Julian lying on his side as if he had turned away from the world because it had become too loud. He was 71. I had not called my mother in 15 years, but word moves through families like smoke under doors. By the funeral, Celeste and Brielle had arrived. My father did not come. That tells you almost everything, but not quite. Celeste arrived in black and started hugging strangers before she signed the guest book. She had a gift for emotional occupation. She could enter a room and make the grief point toward her within 90 seconds. At Julian's reception, she clasped the hands of tenants she had never met and said, "He was such a dear man," as if she had earned the right to grieve him publicly. Brielle stood near the back recording discreet video on her phone. Later, Owen from accounting mentioned she had posted something online about saying goodbye to a great man. I did not look. I had survived 13 by learning not to stare at people performing versions of themselves for applause. I was pouring coffee when my mother found me. 15 years had changed her less than I expected. Same careful hair, same soft perfume, same eyes that could fill with water before the truth had time to object. "Elise," she said. She placed both hands on my shoulders. I looked at them until she removed them. "Blood is blood," she said. "Let's not let the past define a day like this. Blood is blood." There are phrases people use when they do not want to discuss choices. I picked up my coffee. "Enjoy the reception." Then I walked away. Brielle intercepted me near the coat rack. "Mom is really hurting. I'm sure she will find a good audience for that." Brielle blinked. People usually adjusted around my mother. They softened when she cried. They apologized for making her feel the consequences of her own behavior. I had stopped doing that at 13, not because I was strong, but because she had already pushed me out of range. On my way out, Celeste pressed a slip of paper into my hand. Her phone number. Written in the same rounded handwriting I remembered from grocery lists on the refrigerator when I was 12, I put it in my coat pocket. That was a mistake. 3 days later, I met Vivian Hart on the 14th floor of the Morrison and Sullivan building downtown. Her conference room faced west, and the sky was doing that Seattle thing where it looked undecided between rain and confession. Vivian was already seated with a legal pad, 2 binders, and a sealed craft folder on the table. "Before we discuss the will," she said, "you need to understand the structure of the reading." "Reading?" Julian did not want a private family meeting. She said it like the phrase tasted bad. He structured it as a combined memorial record and executor confirmation. 47 invited attendees, attorneys, auditors, accountants, representatives from 3 charitable organizations named in the plan, 2 long-term tenants, a court reporter. He wanted witnesses. I stared at her. For what?" Vivian slid the sealed folder toward me. Across the front, in Julian's slanted handwriting, were 4 words. "Elise, for after. For this," she said, "and for your father." The room became very still. Julian told me Nolan would attempt to interfere. He was specific. Why? The answer is in the folder. Julian instructed that you open it privately after the funeral, but not before you and I spoke. I picked up the folder. It was thicker than I expected. Do I open it now? Not here. Why not? Because grief and legal strategy should not be mixed in a public conference room unless absolutely necessary. That was the first time Vivian made me like her. I took the folder home. I did not open it that night. Julian had taught me something about documents. A document does not become more useful because you panic over it early. Sometimes you put it on the desk and let its weight teach you patience. The texts started 3 days later. Unknown number. "Honey, I know things have been difficult between us, but family needs to come together now. Your father is grieving. We need to discuss Julian's estate." I read it twice and set the phone face down. 20 minutes later. "This is not the time for old resentment. We can handle this like adults." The next morning, a voicemail. Celeste's voice was warm, measured, almost tender. "Elise, sweetheart, call me back. We should do this together." Together. I saved the number under a contact name I could not accidentally romanticize. "Do not answer." Then I forwarded every message to Vivian with 2 words. "For file." She replied within minutes. "Keep everything." So I did. Every text, every voicemail, every timestamp. Julian used to say that when someone shows up at your door with flowers and no occasion, you should check what is behind their back. My mother had shown up with funeral flowers, public grief, and the word family polished for use. The flowers were barely wilted before the estate entered her vocabulary. 4 days after the first text, I came home from work and found my parents in my lobby. My apartment was 3 floors below Julian's old condo, in the same Capitol Hill building. I had moved into it at 23 because Julian insisted I pay market rent if I wanted independence, then pretended not to notice when I chose a unit close enough to check on him after late nights. Celeste sat on the bench near the mailboxes with her purse in her lap. Nolan stood beside her in a flannel jacket I remembered from childhood, hands in his pockets, jaw working like he was chewing on anger. They looked older, not softer, older. 5 minutes, Nolan said. I did not invite them upstairs. I did not sit. I kept my keys in my hand and my work bag over my shoulder. If anything is relevant to the estate, contact Vivian Hart at Morrison and Sullivan. My mother's face twitched. Elise, your father was Julian's brother. Yes, that means something. Not legally. Nolan took 1 step toward me. Do not talk to your mother like that. There it was, 15 years later, and he still reached first for authority he had thrown away when he let a 13-year-old leave with a duffel bag. Vivian Hart, I repeated, Morrison and Sullivan. Celeste stood. Blood is blood. I let the sentence sit. 15 years since she had told me I did not belong in her house. 15 years since blood apparently became silent. Then you should have remembered mine sooner. I walked past them and pressed the elevator button. Nolan followed 2 steps, then stopped when the lobby camera turned slightly in its casing. He had always been braver in rooms without records. As the elevator doors opened, he pulled out his phone. I heard him say, "Peter, it's Nolan. We need to move on this." The doors closed. I rode up alone. I did not know who Peter was. But Julian had trained me to write down unfamiliar names when they entered familiar conflicts. I opened my notes app. Peter? Nolan called from lobby. Friday, 6:45 p.m. Brielle's approach was digital. Over the next 4 days, she sent 13 messages. The first few were polished. Hey, little sister. I miss you. Can we talk? Mom is devastated. You have no idea what this is doing to her. Then the tone shifted. We were kids. You cannot punish everyone forever. Then, if you embarrass this family at the reading, you will regret it. She also posted vague little statements online. Some people forget where they came from. Family should matter more than money. Forgiveness reveals character. Owen from accounting saw one of them and looked uncomfortable all morning. You do not have to tell me, he said at the coffee machine. Good. But if you need a witness that she came to the lobby yesterday, security has the incident report. I looked at him. She came here? He winced. Reception stopped her before she got past the first floor. I checked security later. Brielle had told the front desk she was my sister and demanded access to the executive offices. When they refused, she argued with the guard for 6 minutes, then left. The camera angle caught her looking up at the third-floor windows before she walked out. I forwarded the incident report to Vivian. For file. Vivian replied, Everything is file now. That sentence stayed with me. Everything is file now. There is a strange comfort in documentation after a childhood where adults denied things 5 minutes after doing them. Records do not care whether your mother cries. Timestamps do not soften because your father raises his voice. A camera does not decide a 13-year-old was too sensitive. Documents had a mercy people did not. A week before the reading, I worked late in Julian's office. His office had technically become mine, but I still thought of it as his. The walnut desk, the floor lamp. The frame. He stood. Do nothing else, she said. I won't. Elise. Yes. Your uncle prepared for this. That night, I opened the folder. I sat at Julian's desk at 10:45 p.m. with the lamp on and the city reflected black in the window. Mount Rainier was invisible behind clouds, but I knew where it was. That was something Seattle had taught me. Some things can be hidden and still remain exactly where they are. The folder was sealed with one strip of packing tape. I peeled it back carefully. Inside were 2 things. First, a handwritten letter from Julian. 3 pages, dated June 14, 2024, the same day his final will had been signed. Second, 11 envelopes held together with a binder clip, Portland return addresses, my father's handwriting. I read Julian's letter first. Elise, I did not show you these letters because I never wanted you to feel like something owed. You came to me at 13 with a duffel bag and a library card. You showed up every day after that. That was always enough. Your father, as the will, Vivian, your mother, she wore cream, which was a choice in March rain, and held her phone like a shield. We need to talk. No. You cannot just take everything. I have taken nothing. Uncle Julian was old. He was competent. Mom says you controlled who saw him. Mom says many things when money is nearby. Her face sharpened. You think you are better than us because he gave you a job. He gave me work. I did the job. He was our uncle too. Then maybe one of you should have called him before he died. That landed. For a second, Brielle looked like the sister I remembered from childhood. Not kind, exactly, but human under the polish. Then the old expression slid back. You owe us. I laughed once. I could not help it. For what? For disappearing. There it was, the magic trick abusive families try to perform. They push you out, lock the door, change the story, then accuse you of leaving. You were 16, I said, old enough to remember. She looked away. Mom said you wanted to go. And you believed that? She did not answer. I unlocked my car. Move. Elise. Move, Brielle. She moved. I drove home shaking, which annoyed me. My body still reacted to them like I was 13 and waiting to learn whether I had a bed that night. At a red light on Madison, I caught myself gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles looked bloodless. I made myself loosen one finger at a time. Julian had taught me that too, not in some tender, healing conversation, but during my first difficult tenant negotiation when I was 22 and furious enough to overplay my hand. "Your body can have an opinion," he told me afterward. "It does not get a vote." So I let my body shake. Then I drove home anyway. That night, I did not call anyone. There was nobody to call who could make the morning easier, and I did not want to turn my fear into a task for someone else. I made dinner I barely ate. I checked the folder twice. I reread the capacity exam summary Vivian had provided. I looked at the photocopies of Nolan's letters until the words stopped feeling like knives and started feeling like exhibits. At midnight, I stood in Julian's office and practiced saying 3 sentences out loud. My family did not lose me. They gave me up. Blood was never the problem. Choice was. The first time, my voice broke on family. The second time, it held. By the third, I sounded like someone Julian would have trusted at a closing table. At home, I laid out everything for the morning with the precision Julian had taught me. Black suit, white blouse, low heels, glasses, folder, notebook, pen. My hair pulled back the way Julian had taught me for rooms where people mistook young black women for assistants until the numbers started speaking. I slept badly. At 5:20 a.m., I gave up and made coffee. The city was still dark when I stood by the window. Somewhere in a hotel, Celeste was likely putting on black and rehearsing Hurt. Somewhere, Nolan was checking his phone for updates from Peter Lowell. Somewhere, Brielle was deciding whether tears or outrage would perform better. And I stood in my kitchen with a brass pen in my pocket and 15 years of silence behind me. I felt strangely empty. Not weak, clear. By 9:30, I was on the 14th floor of Morrison & Sullivan. The conference room was already set. 47 chairs arranged in a wide horseshoe around a central table, cream name placards at each seat. At the head, 1 chair with no placard. Mine. Vivian stood near the windows, arranging 3 stacks of documents. Behind her, Mount Rainier filled the glass wall, snow bright against a sky that had cleared overnight. The mountain looked close enough to touch, sharp and silent and unimpressed. A court reporter sat up in the corner. 2 auditors from Cantor and Loeb reviewed their binders near the back. Representatives from the Northwest Children's Fund, Pacific Veterans Trust, and Seattle Public Library Foundation had arrived early. Julian had named them as charitable beneficiaries. He had also invited tenants who had known him for decades, the woman who ran Pioneer Square Books, the couple who managed the Veterans Co-op in Soto, a restaurant owner from Belltown who had once told me Julian kept his rent flat during a hard year because good tenants are harder to replace than carpet. These were not props. They were Julian's record of a life lived through contracts and choices. I set the craft folder beside my chair and sat. Vivian came over and bent low. "If anything unexpected happens, I handle it first. You speak when you are ready, not before." "Understood." "Good." She checked her watch. They accepted for 10. It is 9:32. They arrived at 9:57. My mother entered first. Of course she did. Celeste took 3 steps into the room and stopped just long enough to register the horseshoe of chairs, the court reporter, the auditors, the charity representatives, the tenants, the placards. Her smile flickered, then returned brighter, which meant panic had entered the room with her. Nolan came behind her, scanning faces as if looking for exits disguised as allies. Brielle followed, sunglasses pushed into her hair, phone in hand. Vivian walked toward them. "Mrs. Mercer." "Mr. Mercer, Brielle, thank you for coming." My mother gave a small, wounded laugh. "Of course we came. Julian was family." Vivian did not respond to the performance. "Your seats are marked." They were seated along the left side of the horseshoe, close enough to hear everything and far enough from me that Celeste could not put a hand on my shoulder. My mother looked at my blank placard, or rather the absence of one. "Where is Elise sitting?" Vivian's face did not change. "At the executor's chair." Celeste's smile tightened. "Of course." The reading began at 10:04. Vivian stood at the head of the table with Julian's will in front of her, bound in navy covers, tabs neat along the side. "This proceeding is being transcribed," she said. "It concerns the estate of Julian Mercer, deceased January 9th, 2025. The purpose is to summarize testamentary intent, identify beneficiaries, and confirm the named executor prior to probate filing." Brielle shifted in her chair. The court reporter's fingers began moving. That sound mattered. Tiny keys, soft clicks, the room becoming record. Vivian read the preliminary sections first. Identification, revocation of prior wills, capacity statements, witnesses, notarization, filing references. The formal language settled over the room like locks turning one by one. My mother kept a tissue in her hand, though she had not cried yet. My father checked the door twice, waiting for Peter. Vivian turned a page. Article 2. A charitable distributions. 5% of the estate to the Northwest Children's Fund, 5% to the Pacific Veterans Trust, 5% to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. The representatives nodded quietly. The woman from the Library Foundation pressed 2 fingers to her lips, then lowered her hand to her notebook. Vivian turned another page. Article 3, Residuary Estate. The room tightened. I could feel it. I hereby designate my niece, Elise Marin Mercer, as sole heir to the residue of my estate, including all real property, business holdings of Mercer Property Group LLC, and personal effects. The sentence landed, not loudly, heavily. My mother's tissue stopped moving. I further designate Elise Marin Mercer as sole executor of this estate with full authority for non-intervention administration, as permitted by applicable Washington law. Heads turned toward me. I kept my hands folded. The brass pen rested warm against my ribs inside my jacket pocket. Vivian continued, "This designation is made in full awareness that my brother, Nolan Mercer, is a surviving sibling." She looked directly at my father. "He is intentionally excluded from inheritance. This exclusion is not made in error." The room inhaled. Auditors wrote. The court reporter typed. My father's face changed first. A flush rose from his collar to his jaw. Then my mother's face lost all softness at once, like someone had turned off the light behind it. "This is a mistake," Nolan said. Vivian did not raise her voice. "It is not a mistake. Please remain seated." Brielle lifted her phone. Vivian turned her head. "Phone's away. This is a probate proceeding." Brielle hesitated, then lowered it. That was when Celeste stood. "This is fraud." Her voice cut across the room, sharp and polished. Julian was sick. He did not know what he was doing. She manipulated him. She pointed at me. For 15 years, my mother had not had enough language to ask where I lived. Now, the signing was witnessed by 2 independent parties and notarized. His testamentary intent is documented across more than a decade of correspondence with this office. My father swallowed. "We have a lawyer." Vivian's expression did not move. "Yes, Peter Lowell, solo practice, Tacoma. We are aware." The room shifted. My father blinked. "How do you know that?" "Mr. Lowell contacted this office yesterday as a professional courtesy." Silence filled the conference room from the corners inward. Then someone knocked. The door opened. A man in his mid-40s stepped in carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who had expected 4 chairs and a grieving niece, not 47 witnesses, a court reporter, 3 charity representatives, and a senior estate attorney waiting beside a fully documented will. Peter Lowell stopped 2 steps inside. His eyes moved from Vivian to the auditors, from the auditors to the court reporter, from the court reporter to the binders, then finally to my father. Vivian did not miss a beat. "Mr. Lowell, welcome, please come in." She gestured to an empty chair near the wall. "We were just discussing potential grounds for contest. If you would like to review the will on behalf of your client, I can provide a copy." She slid a bound document across the table. Peter looked at it, then at Nolan. Then at the room again. He sat. For 3 minutes nobody spoke while Peter read. He turned pages carefully. Once he paused at the capacity examination reference. Once he looked toward the court reporter, as if remembering every word he said from that point forward would have weight. Then he closed the document. "Nolan," he said quietly, "we need to talk." My father leaned forward. "Just file what we discussed." "We need to talk outside," Celeste cut in. "What is the problem?" "You said we had grounds." Peter held up one hand. "Mrs. Mercer, I was told this was a private family reading." He glanced around the room. "This is a formal probate proceeding with a substantial factual record." "So?" He tapped the will. "So the record does not support the version of events I was given." There it was, not dramatic, not shouted. The whole collapse of their plan in one careful sentence. "The record does not support the version of events I was given." My father's face went gray. Celeste's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stood, not quickly, not angrily. I placed both hands flat on the table, pushed my chair back, and rose the way Julian used to at the beginning of quarterly reviews. Deliberate, unhurried, like the room could wait because the person standing had earned the floor. Vivian stepped aside. I opened the craft folder. First, I removed Julian's letter. 3 handwritten pages. I held them up so the room could see his handwriting before I read. "My uncle left this for me the day he signed his will," I said. "June 14th, 2024. I opened it after his funeral, as instructed." My voice sounded calmer than I felt. I had practiced once at 3 in the morning in my kitchen, because practice is how you give your future self a railing to hold. I read the first paragraph. The room listened. I read the second. My mother lowered herself slowly back into her chair. When I reached the final paragraph, I slowed down. "Elise, you were never the spare. You were the one who showed up." I let that sentence sit. For 13-year-old me, for the girl on Hannah's couch, for every version of me that had wondered whether being unwanted by the first people who knew you meant something permanent about your worth. Then I set the letter on the table and picked up the stack of envelopes. These are 11 letters my father sent Julian between 2010 and 2024. Each asks for money. Several mention me as leverage. Nolan's chair creaked. "Elise?" I looked at him. "No." The word was small. It worked. My uncle kept them because he understood that one day you might try to call abandonment a misunderstanding. He wanted a record, so here it is. I placed the envelopes beside the will. My family did not lose me. They gave me up. Then they spent 14 years trying to sell access to the daughter they threw away back to the brother who took her in. My mother's eyes filled. This time, nobody softened. "Blood was never the problem," I said. "Choice was." Brielle stared at the envelopes. For once, her phone stayed in her lap. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out Julian's brass pen. The JM engraving had worn smooth on one side from years in my hand. Vivian placed the non-intervention administration paperwork in front of me. I uncapped the pen. The sound was tiny, almost ridiculous, but in that room it felt louder than my mother's accusations. I signed my name, Elise Marin Mercer, sole executor. Then I set the pen down on the walnut table. "If you want to file something," I said to my father, "file it. The will is sound. Vivian will represent the estate. You will be billed for our legal costs." I sat. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Celeste began to cry. Not the quiet kind, not grief, performance trying to find an audience after the stage lights had been cut. She pressed the tissue to her face and sobbed. No one reached for her. The woman from the Children's Fund looked down at her notes. The Veterans Trust representative folded his hands. The Library Foundation director closed her notebook. The court reporter typed the last line and then waited, fingers hovering. Brielle's hand moved toward her purse, toward the phone, then stopped. She had seen the court reporter. She had seen the auditors. She had seen 44 people watching her decide whether to turn legal humiliation into content. She folded her hands instead. Peter Lowell stood. He straightened his tie and picked up his briefcase. "Ms. Hart," he said to Vivian, "I will send notice regarding representation status by Monday." "Send it to my office," Vivian said. He nodded once and left without looking at my father. The door closed with a soft click. That sound ended something. Nolan helped Celeste stand. His hand was tight around her arm, less comfort than control. Brielle followed them. At the doorway, she looked back at me. I could not read her expression. Fear, maybe, or the first terrible recognition that the story she had been told required me to be smaller than the person sitting at that table. She left without a word. The remaining people stayed seated for a few seconds. Nobody rushed to fill the silence. Then Beatrice from the Children's Fund raised her hand slightly, as if we were in a board meeting and order still mattered. "On behalf of the fund," she said, "thank you for honoring Julian's wishes." A few people clapped softly. Not applause for a performance. Agreement. The room emptied slowly after that. Handshakes. Quiet condolences, a tenant telling me Julian had once replaced her heating system before she asked because he noticed her employees wearing coats indoors. The Library Foundation director telling me Julian always answered emails with complete sentences and no emojis, which somehow made me laugh for the first time all day. When the room was empty, Vivian closed the door. She sat across from me. "There is one more thing." I almost laughed again. Of course there is. Years ago, during an estate planning meeting, I asked Julian why he was leaving everything to you. She removed her glasses and set them on the table. Not because I questioned the choice, because the law requires clarity, especially with an excluded sibling. I waited. He said, "Vivian, I built 12 buildings and a company. The thing I am proudest of walked into my guest room at 13 with a duffel bag and never once asked me for anything she did not earn." The room blurred, not dramatically, just enough that Mount Rainier became white light through the window. I looked down at the folder. Elise, for after. For years, I had thought Julian saved me because I had nowhere to go. That was true, but he had also watched me become someone, not a rescue project. Not a debt, not a sad child he had been forced to keep, someone he was proud of. "Go home," Vivian said gently. "Sleep. The estate will still be here Monday." I slid the folder into my work bag. It did not belong in Julian's office anymore. It belonged in mine. 6 months later, I sat in Julian's old chair, my chair, reviewing the close on a Pioneer Square mixed-use building. $4.2 million, my first acquisition as sole executor. Julian would have liked it. Older building, strong bones, tenants worth keeping. The kind of property that rewards patience if you do not let vanity overpay for a pretty lobby. Nolan did file a contest petition in April through a different attorney. The court dismissed it within 90 days. No grounds, no evidence, no standing. The estate billed him $84,000 in legal defense costs. By August, a wage garnishment had started against his auto shop. I did not celebrate that. Consequences do not need confetti to be real. Celeste sent one letter in September. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The same round loops from grocery lists when I was 12. The same softness that had once written my name on school forms, then later on a slip of paper at a funeral because money made me reachable again. I did not open it. I filed it in my desk drawer beside Julian's notebook and closed the drawer. Brielle deleted her public account in July. Owen mentioned it over coffee, careful not to sound like he had been checking on my behalf. I did not look it up. I did not need proof that her audience had finally become inconvenient. There were smaller consequences, too, the kind nobody makes movies about because they do not happen loudly enough. A cousin who had liked Brielle's posts emailed my office asking whether I could help her husband with a lease dispute. I forwarded the message to outside counsel and did not answer personally. An aunt sent a holiday card addressed to "Our sweet Elise," as if ink could go back in time. It came to the company office because she did not have my home address. I gave it to Vivian for the estate correspondence file. My mother tried one more route through sentiment. She sent a photo of me at 5 years old wearing a paper crown from a school play. No text, just the picture. For an hour, I stared at that small girl and felt the old ache pull at me. She had no idea yet. She still thought adults were basically honest. She still thought home was a place you could lose temporarily and earn back by being good. I saved the photo. Then I blocked the number. Both things can be true. You can grieve the child you were and still protect the adult who survived becoming her. Mercer Property Group had 12 buildings when Julian died. It has 13 now. The total portfolio value sits just north of $28 million, depending on which appraiser you ask and how optimistic they feel about cap rates that week. I run it the way Julian taught me. Read carefully, speak when necessary. Do not mistake emotion for obligation. Never sign anything without knowing who benefits from your signature. The brass pen stays on my desk now in a narrow tray beside the phone. Some mornings I pick it up just to feel the weight. Not because I need reminding that Julian loved me. I know that now. Because weight can be useful. The right kind reminds you what matters. Here is what he taught me in the 15 years between the night I packed a duffel bag and the morning my mother walked into that conference room wearing black. Family is not the person who shares your blood and returns only when a balance sheet gives them courage. Family is the person who drives 3 hours without making you beg. Family is the person who gives you a locked door, hard work, a pen for important things, and the dignity of being expected to grow. Family is the person who builds a wall of witnesses around you before he dies because he knows the people who abandoned you will eventually try to call it grief. My parents did not lose me. They made a choice when I was 13. Julian made a different one. That difference became my life. And once you understand who showed up when you had nothing, the people who walked away cannot buy their way back with the word family. That is not bitterness. That is a boundary. And a boundary, I learned, can become its own kind of inheritance. That was my story. 1 scholarship, 1 duffel bag, 1 sealed folder, 47 witnesses, and a lawyer who realized too late that the room was already a record. If this reminded you of someone who keeps being asked to forgive what nobody has named, share it with them, drop a comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.